The late afternoon sun stretched across a quiet street market in Portland, Oregon, turning the white tents gold. People wandered with coffee cups, checking handmade crafts, jewelry, candles, and art. Near the end of the row sat a small folding table covered with watercolor paintings, soft skies, mountains, tiny birds, and flowers. Behind it sat a thin girl with a knitted hat pulled low over her bald head. Emily was only 16, but life had forced her to grow up fast. She arranged her paintings carefully, every piece made with shaky hands between chemo sessions. Her doctors had raised the dosage again. Her father had been laid off. Her mother was gone. The bills were piling so fast she sometimes cried quietly at night, whispering apologies to herself for being too expensive to keep alive. So she painted, and sold her art whenever she had the strength. That day, fewer people stopped. She could feel her body weakening again. The cold February air made her hands tremble. But she kept smiling, repeating the same soft line she had practiced. "Hi, these are my artworks. I'm selling them to help pay for my treatment." Most people smiled politely and walked past. A few dropped coins. A couple admired her drawings but said they had no cash. Emily didn't blame anyone. Everyone had their own struggles. She lowered her eyes, fighting dizziness, praying she wouldn't faint again. Across the street, a man held the hand of a little girl as they walked out of a grocery store. His uniform shirt still had grease stains from the auto shop, and a small lunchbox bounced at his side. This was Daniel, a single dad, 35, worn by life but gentle at the core. His daughter, Lily, chattered nonstop about her school day. "Daddy, look, art," she said suddenly, pulling his sleeve. Daniel followed her gaze and saw a thin girl sitting behind the art table, cheeks pale, smile fading every few seconds as exhaustion dragged at her body. Something inside him tightened. He recognized that look. He had seen it before, 8 years ago, when his wife had battled cancer and lost. Lily ran to the table first. "Wow, these are so pretty," she said, touching a painting of falling leaves. Emily smiled shyly. "Thank you. I'm selling them to help pay for my chemo." Daniel's heart cracked a little. She said it gently, not as a complaint, but as a quiet truth. "How much for this one?" he asked, holding up a watercolor of a sunrise. Emily hesitated. $20, but if it's too much, I can do 10. Daniel knelt in front of her. "These are worth far more than 20. Her eyes widened. "Really?" He nodded. "You've got talent. Real talent." She blushed with surprise. Compliments were rare. He reached for his wallet, and froze. It was almost empty. He had spent most of his money on groceries and rent. Being a single dad meant every dollar mattered, and he had a stack of unpaid bills waiting at home. Still, looking at Emily's trembling hands, he couldn't just walk away. He handed her a 20. "I'll take this one." Emily lit up. She bagged the painting carefully, using both hands so she wouldn't drop it. But something tugged at Daniel's chest. He looked at the rest of her work. The colors, the effort, the quiet desperation she tried to hide. He swallowed hard. "Emily, how much do you still need for your next chemo session?" he asked softly. She tried to smile, but her voice cracked. "The hospital wants a deposit before they continue treatment." "It's a lot." "How much?" She looked down at the table. $3,000. Daniel almost stopped breathing. $3,000. A number she said like she was apologizing for existing. He felt his throat tighten. Lily looked between them, sensing the sadness even if she didn't understand. He stood there, for a long moment, struggling with the impossible. He didn't have the money. He was barely holding his own life together. But walking away from her felt like abandoning someone who had already been abandoned too many times. Lily tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, can we help her?" Kids never complicated things. They only saw people hurting and people who could help. Daniel placed the painting under his arm and stepped forward. "Emily, pack up your things." She blinked. "But, I haven't sold anything else." "You don't need to." His jaw tightened as he made the decision he knew would change everything. "We're going to get you that treatment." She froze, her breath catching. What? How? You don't even know me." Daniel exhaled. "Maybe I don't. But I know what it's like to watch someone run out of time." Emily's eyes filled with tears. She tried to speak, but the words tangled in her throat. Daniel placed his hand over hers. "Let me help you. Please." For the first time in months, Emily nodded without hesitation. They closed the art booth and loaded her paintings into Daniel's truck. He drove straight to the hospital, Lily humming in the backseat, unaware of the weight of the moment but happy to help. At the front desk, the receptionist looked up as Daniel approached. "I'm here to pay Emily Stone's treatment deposit." She blinked. "Are you a relative?" "No," he said firmly. "Just someone who cares." The receptionist looked at the screen. "Her required deposit is $3,000. Daniel took a long breath and pulled out his phone. He opened his savings app, the one labeled, Emergency Fund. The one he had sworn to keep untouched after losing his wife. The one he had been building for years so Lily would always be safe if anything happened to him. He pressed, transfer. The number dropped to 0. Emily covered her mouth with both hands, shaking. Tears streamed down her face. "Why would you do this for me?" Daniel looked at her with the kind of quiet strength only a man who had suffered deeply could carry. "Because someone once helped my wife. And I never got the chance to repay that kindness. So I'm giving it to you." Emily burst into tears, clinging to him in a shaking hug. For the first time in a long time, she felt like the world hadn't forgotten her. Days turned to weeks. Emily's treatment restarted. Daniel and Lily visited her after school, bringing flowers, puzzles, and warm soup. Emily began to smile again, really smile, and the color slowly returned to her cheeks. The doctors were amazed. Her scans improved. The chemo worked. Her strength came back. One afternoon, months later, Emily walked, without help, out of the hospital doors, her hat gone, tiny strands of new hair shining in the sun. Daniel and Lily stood waiting with a small bouquet. She ran straight into their arms. "You saved my life," she whispered. Daniel shook his head. "No, Emily. Your strength did. We just gave you a little push." Later that evening, Emily returned to the street market. But this time, her paintings were not for survival, they were for celebration. A crowd gathered around her table, admiring the bright colors and hopeful skies. People who once walked past now stopped, smiled, and bought her work with pride. A reporter asked her, "What changed for you?" Emily glanced toward Daniel and Lily, who stood beside her like family. "Someone believed in me when I felt invisible," she said. "And it saved my life." Daniel placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You're impossible to ignore now." Under the warm glow of string lights, the three of them stood together, a mechanic with grease under his nails, a little girl with a bright smile, and a once broken teen who now had a future again. Not because the world was kind, but because one man refused to walk away.